Glitza has 3 distinct types of sealer coats, and although they each have their own individual properties, they can all be applied with the same techniques. Baca sealer is the easiest to use. It is ideal for complex or cut-up layouts. It dries overnight, so its open time is longer, and it has minimal risk of edge grain fall-off or dive down. Satin sealer achieves a very high film build. It has the highest hiding properties and the highest solids content. Under normal conditions, it dries in approximately 2 hours. Satin sealer works well with difficult hungry wood species and harsh lighting conditions. Glitza sealer has exceptional flow and leveling. It has a high solids content with a high film build and a clear, transparent appearance that gives floors a real richness and depth. Glitza sealer dries in approximately 2 hours under normal conditions. All of Glitza's sealers give a deep, three-dimensional appearance to exotics or highly figured wood. It's important with all Glitza sealers to consider the room temperature and the temperature of the sealer itself. Drying time can be affected by the temperature as well as the pot life of the hardened sealer. If the temperature is too hot, a Glitza retarder can be added to the sealer to allow for more open time. For more information about Glitza sealers, you can download spec sheets from our website. The first step for each sealer begins by combining the sealer and measured hardener. Add the hardener gradually, then mix them together completely. Next, you'll choose from one of 4 application techniques. You can apply the sealer with a roller, with a lamb's wool applicator, a T-bar, or with a brush. Let's begin with the rolling technique. First, prep your roller by carefully removing any loose hairs that could end up in the finish, and inspect for flat spots on the roller. Don't rush this simple procedure. It pays to be thorough. Always use a 100% woven lamb's wool roller with a 1/2-inch nap, and make sure the roller core is plastic. Now you're ready to choose the best place in the room to begin. Make sure that you have clean shoes when you enter the room so that you don't leave any dust in the finish. Always start by cutting in around the edges with a brush. Apply the sealer evenly, generally following the grain of the wood. If you go cross-grain when you're cutting in, you should pull out the finish with the grain. Cut in an area that is easy to manage, and then begin applying the sealer with the roller. Saturate the roller and then spread it evenly on the floor. Once the sealer covers the area, begin ramping off with the roller. This movement is key to a smooth finish because it feathers the edges and leaves no lines or thick spots in the sealer coat. Saturate the roller. Carefully spread the sealer evenly, always trying to achieve the recommended coverage rates. Be sure to keep control of the puddle of sealer and then ramp off to achieve a feathered edge. Occasionally, check to make sure your application is consistent and that no areas were missed. Notice that there is very little pressure on the roller and almost no weight. Let the roller do the work. Manage the puddle by always pulling the puddle towards you, creating less chances for drips when ramping and when feathering off. Now let's prepare for the lamb's wool technique for applying the sealer coat. Removing any loose material from the lamb's wool block is extremely important. A clean applicator is essential to a good finish. The first step for each sealer begins by combining the sealer and measured hardener. Add the hardener gradually, then mix them together completely. Pour your sealer into an application bucket. Make sure that you have clean, dust-free shoes when you enter the room. We'll begin by cutting in with a brush. Spread the sealer evenly and then brush it out, generally following the grain of the wood. If you do go cross-grain when cutting in, you should pull out the finish with the grain. Now, soak the lamb's wool block in the sealer and spread it on a manageable area of the floor. Squeeze out the excess so that you can feather out the finish. Notice that there is very little pressure on the lamb's wool and almost no weight. Let the applicator do the work. Move the puddle of sealer toward you. Carefully control it as you move it over the floor. Put very little weight on the applicator as you feather out. Occasionally, check to make sure your application is consistent and that no areas were missed. A smooth, even coat is best, always trying to achieve the recommended coverage rates. Our next technique for application is the T-bar method. Carefully prepare the T-bar applicator by removing any loose debris. The first step for each sealer begins by combining the sealer and measured hardener. Add the hardener gradually, then mix them together completely. With the T-bar method, you'll want to use a bucket with a spout to pour the sealer onto the floor. Make sure that you have clean shoes when you enter the room so you don't leave any dust in the finish. First, cut in with a brush, spreading evenly and generally following the grain as you pull out. If you go cross-grain when cutting in, you should pull out the finish with the grain. Pour the sealer onto the floor. Then take the T-bar and move the puddle of sealer evenly over the floor using the snowplow technique with the applicator at an angle. Keep the T-bar applicator on the floor while you move the puddle of sealer. Squeeze out the excess sealer so that you can feather out. Keep control of the puddle of sealer, manage it, keep it ahead of you, keep it consistent, always trying to achieve recommended coverage rates. Occasionally, check to make sure your application is consistent and that no areas were missed. Make it smooth and even, and you should have a sealer coat that flows and levels itself beautifully. Now let's look at the brushing technique for applying the sealer coat. Once again, when removing the brush from the metal container, begin by making sure the brush is free of any debris that could get into the sealer coat. For this demonstration, the hardener has already been mixed with the sealer, so you can pour it into a lined bucket. It's a good tip to mark one side of the bucket with blue tape, so that you only lift it from one side in order to keep the finish off of your hands. Check that your shoes are clean and free of dust when you enter the room. You'll begin the application by cutting in around the edges, spreading the sealer evenly, then pulling out, generally following the grain of the wood. Notice that the brush always moves with a smooth motion. This minimizes drips and splashes and helps achieve an even seal coat. Saturate the brush and then drip an adequate amount of sealer onto the floor. Spread it evenly with a smooth, fluid motion, generally with the grain, being careful to move the puddle of sealer towards you, always trying to achieve recommended coverage rates. Occasionally, check to make sure your application is consistent and that no areas were missed. Notice that the brush always moves with a smooth motion. The Glitza Gold Seal system is designed to use one seal coat and one top coat. Some contractors wish to add a second seal coat for more build or less grain definition. It should be noted that we do not recommend more than one top coat unless there is a flaw in the appearance of your final coat. Glitza Gold Seal will be ready to prep for the top coat in 2 hours in most cases. The same is true with satin sealer. If you choose the versatile Baca sealer, it has to dry overnight before beginning the prep necessary for a good top coat.